Thank you, Mr. President, and I'm very pleased to join my colleague from Iowa today to highlight the need to responsibly reopen America, our economy, as we continue to fight this COVID pandemic. But before I would talk about reopening America, I would like to address the deep tragedy at the brutal death of George Floyd. It is clear that our entire country is united in horror and opposition to the violent killing. Racial discrimination has absolutely no place in this country whatsoever. This senseless murder is unacceptable, and those responsible should be held accountable. I'm anguished at the death of George Floyd. I'm anguished at the violence that we are seeing all across our streets today. There is no question that we must do our part to change racist attitudes that unfortunately exist today, and this must be done in a peaceful way. Looting and violent riots are not the way to do this, and it's not the way to honor George Floyd or those that are protesting peacefully, which is the great majority of people. George's brother encouraged all of us the other day to peacefully protest. He said that violence won't bring his brother back, and no, it won't bring his brother back. It makes me sad to see the businesses destroyed, monuments honoring some of our nation's bravest heroes destroyed, and violence happening in the cities across the nation. In my state of West Virginia, there have been protests. However, they've been peaceful. I commend my West Virginians for peacefully protesting, and I encourage them to continue this. Instead of violence, we need to come together as a nation, to listen to one another, and to learn from one another. This is how real change can happen. President George W. Bush and Mrs. Laura Bush published a statement yesterday, and I'd like to read the last paragraph because I found it really quite moving as to how we are going to address this issue. Quote, "The rule of law ultimately depends on the fairness and legitimacy of the legal system, and achieving justice for all is the duty for all. This will require a consistent, courageous, and creative effort. We serve our neighbors best when we try to understand their experience. We love our neighbors as ourselves when we treat them as equals in both protection and compassion. There is a better way, the way of empathy and shared commitment and bold action and a peace rooted in justice. I am confident that together Americans will choose the better way." And I appreciate so much the entire statement, but those last several words, as I said, really touched me. On the matter before us today, many communities in our country are beginning to open, including my state of West Virginia. As everywhere, COVID has had terrible impact on many of our communities all across the country. The disease has affected every part of our lives. More than 105,000 of our fellow Americans have lost their lives because of this terrible virus. That includes 78 West Virginians. The unofficial employment rate is 14% in this country, but in my state of West Virginia, it's a shade over 15%. And we expect those numbers to rise when the May numbers are published later this week. State and local officials across the country closed much of our economy in order to slow the disease. Our goal as a nation was to bend the curve in order to prevent our hospitals and other medical providers from being overrun. In West Virginia, as in most of the country, we've been successful in bending the curve and reducing the spread of this terrible disease. It's important as we move now to responsibly reopen our economy. We should continue to follow the guidelines prepared by our public health experts: washing our hands, social distance, avoid touching your face, and wearing your mask. Following these guidelines will help make America's reopening successful. They'll protect your health and the health of your community. And by hindering the spread of the disease and allowing businesses to remain open following these guidelines, this will aid our economic recovery as well. Most Americans understand that there is no way to choose between public health and a strong economy because you cannot have one without the other. We can't have a strong economy if we are not protecting people from becoming sick. And we will not be able to make the necessary long-term investments in public health if we don't have a strong economy. That is why a responsible step-by-step approach to reopening the economy that is driven by the data in states and local communities is so very important. West Virginia's cumulative percentage of positive tests now stands at 2%, less than 1/5 of the national average. Our daily positive test percentages as of this morning was 0.88%. This is despite the fact that West Virginia has tested a higher percentage of our residents than the national average and all of our neighboring states. Even more encouraging is that our cumulative percent of positive tests has remained below 3% since April 25th, even as we began reopening our businesses in May. But we have faced our challenges. Outbreaks at our long-term care facilities in Monongalia County, Wayne County, Jackson County, and Kanawha County have resulted in 43 deaths. But you know what? Our state responded quickly and tested every resident and every staff member in the nursing homes in our state. We were the first state in the nation to do this, setting an example that many have followed. Just last week, we had an outbreak at one of our prisons where we had 118 positive tests. So we know that this is still there and it still presents a danger. But I'm really proud of the way we've pulled together during this crisis and addressed these challenges. The progress reflected by the statistics are only possible because our state's residents have followed the guidelines. I want to thank all of the medical professionals, the first responders, frontline workers who have gone beyond the call of duty to protect public health and keep our communities running during this most difficult time. But opening our economy is paramount, and opening it responsibly must be done. Even though the COVID is still with us, we must continue working together, following the guidelines so that we can protect both our economy and our health. Mr. President, I yield the floor.